Hello and welcome to the Discipline Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shagory. Our goal here at Discipline Troublemakers is to provide insight and tangible value to CEOs and leaders of tech companies, both large and small. We cover critical ground around scale, operational fitness, acquisition, and creating great companies. Today, we'll be talking with Mcbride, a seasoned negotiation and communications coach. Al helps CEOs and business leaders gain a real psychological edge in high impact negotiations through his Goliath negotiation method. He's also a host of a podcast called Dealing with Goliath and the author of a new book on negotiation, which we'll make sure we talk about today. Al, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for carving out some time today to chat with us.
Not at all, Scott. It's a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, as always. So let's go ahead and kind of jump right into things a bit, because you've been a negotiation coach, helping with negotiation, et cetera, and communication for a long time. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, and thinking about CEOs, because I know you help a wide variety of business leaders, not just, say CEOs or tech CEOs specifically. But what's the biggest, either misunderstanding CEOs have in negotiating a desired outcome, or maybe a misfocus if it's, perceived as something that maybe it is not, or that it could possibly be? I'm wondering what, again, your experience and your take on, CEOs and their misunderstanding of what negotiation is or could be, please.
Yeah, well, there's a few. I mean, as you can imagine, it's a broad church. Just like entrepreneurs, there are quite a lot of similarities or characteristics, but there's a huge variety there. I mean, there's a few different approaches. So one of the issues I find is that people still tend to fall sooner or later into quite an aggressive mindset. So they're either aggressive already because they think they need to be. Which generally, I work with CEOs, work with business leaders, I work with a lot of different industries, but also people, the key thing is that they have autonomy. And one of the areas that I do enjoy working with a lot actually is litigation lawyers in particular. And particularly because I see that change. Because litigation lawyers, it's a very complex series of relationships. And there's a parallel here with businesses, because litigation lawyers aren't just fighting for them, they're fighting for their firm, they're fighting for the client most of all. And so they have to be seen in a certain way to be highly aggressive, because who wants like a soft little rolling puppy, fluffy puppy of a litigation? Everyone wants an attack dog, right? And so this is very much the element. They think that's the only mode that they can be. And I find an awful lot of business owners, CEOs, people working where they have a lot at stake are also quite either consciously or subconsciously, feeling they have to act in a certain way of expectations, both of themselves and their peers, their colleagues, their staff, and maybe even the other side, as to if I show any weakness, I'll be absolutely mauled. Or whatever their definition of weakness is. And so to get back to there's a very roundabout way of getting to answer your question, Scott, which is the perception of emotion was the short answer. Perception of emotion is one of the most misunderstood things, because it also goes with the history of negotiation, where initially it was very much a legal-based area where you were wanting to protect at all costs about all the things that could possibly go wrong. And that was a useful way for its time. Then it evolved into economists taking that over, where they're putting all these models on top of it that had some use again, but wasn't quite the full picture. And where it's developed in the last 20 years is most interesting, because the branch of economists of behavioral economics, which is largely psychologists getting at economics, where it's actually how humans behave. So we're finally only in the last 20 years getting to some sort of a grips with how to think of, how to manage, and how to then act with and from your emotions. So that's one of the biggest difficulties. And I can expand on that further if you like. Like, as I said, the parallel with the litigation lawyers is they keep thinking they have to be highly aggressive, have to be dominating at all times. And that any time they're not, it can be seen as a sign of weakness, to be taken advantage of, and so on. And so, uh, and so this is one of the areas that we need to sort of readdress, because there's always a place for being aggressive. There absolutely is.
The reason why I wanted to open up with it is because I've obviously listened to a number of your podcasts. I enjoy your show, and for me, I think there is this. I wasn't thinking of it necessarily strictly in emotional terms as a foundation, but where there is this persona or this character that many people have in their head, that they perceive that they need to be on behalf of others, even if it is very foreign to them on a day-to-day basis. I mean, here in the United States, I'm guessing it's many other places too. You got programs such as Shark Tank. You've got programs such as, Billions, or, essentially billionaires, ripping each other's hearts out and just trying to destroy each other. It's great theater. And yes, we're all on a show, and we all are on a stage, if you will, and there's a theater to be played and whatnot. But some people really enjoy it. They enjoy getting into, whatever role that might be and have a play. But I think that, again, there's just this perception about what that is, and particularly, say, for here in the United States, where, unlike cricket, we like to see a game be won or lost. There has to be a winner. We hate draws. We hate being caught in the middle. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think it's true, and it's not breaking, but offering a different perspective where you can still be yourself, achieve what your desired outcome is, your team's is, etc., and still win in everyone else's eyes, even if it's just about your ego in the end or those perceived needs. Is
Well,
kind of how I mean,
there's so many points there I could pick up on, Scott. So forgive me if I miss a few and I have to jump around.
No, quite all right. Yeah,
there were quite a few things, because the emotion really is, as I said, the feeling state. Yeah. But that's related to who you're being, which you alluded to, as you say, the identity, or indeed the role that you're adopting. And so many people are stuck in too narrow an array of roles. You have a huge amount of choice there, and people don't realize that. And that's one of the joys of working with a lot of clients, is that to see that pop, that moment where they go, oh, I don't just have to be this attack dog, or just have to be whatever way they think they have to be, that they can adopt other modes of being, which allow them to then naturally, without being too overthinking it, they can then flow to different emotional states. So I'll give you again an example where someone who's very much the attack dog, going to dominating all the time, trying to attack the other side, they can then suddenly realize, oh, so they have the versatility to move down to considering the other side interest openly, and actually asking, is this the case? Where they're going to compromising, going to accommodating of the interests of the other side, to try and build that rapport, to then bring people up into collaborating. And collaborating really is the ideal. The definition of collaborating kind of is the basis of the whole thing, if you really want a shortcut. I mean, things aren't simple, but this is a little bit of a shortcut, because compromise it's a zero sum. You say 10, I say 20, we meet around 15. It's that kind of split the difference horror show. And although they say never split the difference, like the famous book, which is a fabulous read, by the way, although they say that, it actually is appropriate for really low stakes situations where it doesn't really matter. Like, you're at a little antiques fair, the guy says, hey, I want 20. You say, I'll give you 10, and you meet somewhere around 15. And if you go to certain countries, they're nearly insulted if you don't play that game, right?
Indeed.
So they're like, what do you mean you're paying me? Well, you're no fun. What's going on?
Well, it's a loss of respect.
It's a loss of respect. So, and as a quick parallel, that is a point that we must return to, is that thinking of this whole process as a game, not to make it flippant, but there's some benefits in having that gameful perspective, the gameful mindset. But I digress. So compromising is where there's a zero-sum element. And sometimes, look, in every negotiation with any complexity, there's going to be some elements where you either have the thing or you don't. You either give that percentage or they have it. They have it or you have it, right? And that's fine. But it's asking the key question. It's going in with the overall mindset of saying, you know what? How can both of us get to as close to 100% of what we want, or even more? And people go, what do you mean even more? And you go, well, it's 100% of what you think is possible. But that's just your brain working on it. What happens if you have their brain working on it too? Not just to solve, their problem, like you're trying to solve your problem, but actually solving each other's situation to an even better solution. Now, people are going, oh yeah, that's lovely, Al, but like, how the hell is that going to happen? When people are highly aggressive. And it's exactly what you're saying, is that where we started is that one of the greatest traps people fall into is, and huge, substantial research on this, where an awful lot of negotiators say, oh, I'd love a very trusting, good rapport sort of relationship where we can add value and create value and all that. But what happens is they go in, and the slightest signs of danger or threat, they return back to safety, so that they're missing that, and so that they are attacking, so they're not showing vulnerability, so that all of that sort of cards close to the chest stuff, which has its place. Again, we don't want to be just totally daft and totally open and vulnerable and transparent. Trust takes time to build. There's a back and forth. I say I'm going to do something and I do it. You say you're going to do something and you do it. And suddenly there's things open up once that it's not built in a day, but rapport can be established almost instantaneously. We've all met people where we just get along. We're on the same page. We're just, some things don't quite need to be explained, but it's also then a bravery, strength through vulnerability. I don't mean absolute, total vulnerability, but I mean being that braver one who will step outside of the barricade, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, and say, look, this is what I need, okay? What do you actually need? I know you're telling me things, but what's the need beneath that? Let's get to that need. And to address that further, this is one of these things that you see all the time, which is that CEOs, business leaders, anyone who's negotiating, and particularly when it's high stakes, and people who are highly goal orientated, this is also a trait, is the great to have clarity on the goals, right? But one of the most important things about goal setting is being absolutely crystal clear as to why you want that goal achieved. Where will that bring you? It's the project management question. How does this make things better, right? And when you have that why crystal clear, then the destination suddenly becomes slightly more fluid, because then that's one of multiple potential destinations that will deliver on the purpose that I'm trying to achieve, rather than the destination itself. Because people are so focused on the destination that half the time, and I've seen this, they literally say, oh, no, I don't want that. It's like on the other side of coming up, but this suits your needs better, and you're getting more cool things that you kind of don't need, but we know you'll need them down the line. But this is just, no, I want that. It's okay, fine. Take the thing that's less because you're so fixated on it, because that's what's victory, right? But the amount of people, and look, yourself, Scott, there are so many things that they're out in the realm of hyper complexity, right? But there, more importantly, are the fundamentals. You're into martial arts, right? As I know, right?
I am, yes, that's
And
true.
you know as well as I do, you go to any martial arts studio, dojo, you name it, right?
Yep.
And the top guys, yeah, they might be doing some mad complex stuff. But the other half of the time, particularly when they're warming up, they're doing the absolute fundamentals, the things they've done 10,000 times before. So it comes back to this with negotiation. What are your fundamentals? And one of the key ones to get crystal clear on people, and you ask guys, sometimes guys who have thousands of hours of experience, well, what's the actual purpose? And how does that, detail, like what is this to do? And they don't really know. They're like, oh, well, this was the objective we set. So they're stuck on that one. It's like saying, oh, I need to get to, number 22 Via della Luce in Rome, right? Now, if that's your house and the one place that you need to stay, that's fine, right? But if you just want to be somewhere in Italy, and that's the point, that you want to enjoy Italy, you want to enjoy the food, you want to enjoy an ancient city, maybe there's more options, right? If you're in Rome, maybe there's more options that are better than 22 Via della Luce, right? I mentioned that because I think that was the address where I used to live there back in the day. But anyway, maybe it was a different number. But the point's the same, is that it makes navigation a lot easier when you have a criteria rather than just an almost physical destination, which is kind of the equivalent of what people have in mind. It's a trap, hugely limiting, damaging trap.
Yeah, and
So
I would
sorry, I'm
agree.
rambling on here.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead.
no, quite all right. Yeah, I mean, I would fully agree. I mean, to pull in, my martial arts, I'm been a student of a Korean system for almost 15 years, and a third degree at this point, and a senior instructor. And most people who join, they join thinking about offense. They think about, okay, I need to be out there, looking tough, be able to project power, be able to project authority, and back that up with some measure of skill, whatever that skill level happens to be. And yet the reality is it's very much about risk management, risk assessment and risk management. And to your point earlier, it's when I look at CEOs, business leaders, it could be anything about negotiation where, again, it's they project around the outcome. I desire or we need X, Y, or Z, like you say. Maybe it is to get to that, whatever that destination is. But the frame inside both themselves and in the team ends up being around counterintuitively or somewhat of a paradox where it's very much a defensive position. It's not about what's actually possible. It's about what is the minimum level of success that we need to achieve so I don't look like an idiot in front of, whomever my constituency or constituencies might be. What is the minimum loss to me that I could accept? Well, I don't want to get fired. I don't want this. I don't want that. It's all about I don't. And, as we would be aware of, it's about ultimately, I think, having more fear, more confidence in some cases in your fears and doubts and positioning for that, even with a desired outcome, than it is with something that could be, much, much bigger, much more collaborative, not to get woo woo and foolish about it, but that, yeah, think about what is not just the outcome, what is the possibility? How do we redefine what's possible? And some stuff it's not worth it. Like you say, if we're negotiating food or we're doing something else, it's pretty. Hopefully, it's pretty low stakes, unless it's a chili cheesesteak or something like that. But yeah,
That's
you've
very
got
important.
or fish and chips where home is for you. That can be quite controversial. But to really kind of get to that, the heart of what actually matters, which is what I like about, again, what you do is to try and really get to the heart of that, whether it is foundational at the emotional level or something else. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, for anyone who knows some of the basic negotiation theory, it is this difference between compromise and collaboration. And I'm sorry to bang on about it, but it's one of these super simple concepts that then gets not profound, but it runs into a lot of things. So, for example, it is the difference between seizing value and creating value.
Mm.
Compromise is just seizing. Like, if it's 0 or 1. If I get 40%, you get 60. If I get 60, you get 40. That's seizing value. And
Yep.
certain tactics have traditionally worked when the game is largely seizing value.
Mm-hmm.
And that still can be the factor sometimes with one-off transactions, and transaction is the word because it's highly transactionary. It's
Mm.
not if there's any element of longer term relationship or trust involved, seizing is, I mean, it has its place. Like all of these things, it's not to be
Yeah.
discarded completely, because you do need to be able to justify why you think you deserve whatever 60%. The other side is saying no, you don't. Right? Like you do need to have your some of your facts and your details and your argument, which is another part of it, right, as to why you want the situation to be a certain way. But I mean, the super simple analogy is, I mean, there's loads of them, but one of the classic ones that people seem to like is the pizza analogy, with the two kids, and you have a pizza and you say, okay, one kid gets to cut it, the other gets to choose which half to keep the one cutting it honest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very positional. That's like presuming everything's the same. But
Yeah.
instead, you might just get curious. And that's the absolute key to all of this, by the way, is getting curious and going, hold on a second. Now, I'm presuming both of you want the same thing, which is as much pizza as possible, right? And then one of the kid goes, no, I had a big lunch. I actually, but you know what I love? I love all the ham. I'm a fiend for the ham and the olives. And the other
Hmm.
one goes, well, I don't care about the olives. So next thing you know, they've already sorted their own problem. One kid has essentially 2/3 of the pizza, and the other kid has a third, but all the olives. And both of them are happy. And they're more happy than if it was just compromised. And that's
Hmm.
kind of almost, it's one of the silly little metaphors, if you like, for collaboration versus compromise. And it's also this idea of positional negotiation versus interests, and that's always the key intro for then talking about being crystal clear on your own interests, but then
Hmm.
being bold enough and brave enough. And it can take bravery. Like, some negotiation partners are easier to work with than others, but it can
Yeah.
take bravery to say, look, what do you need? And knowing that you're still only getting part of the picture, particularly if you're negotiating with a much larger organization where there's multiple different, what would you say, different needs to be met, and different political games going on, and all sorts of different complexities behind the scene, some of which the person you're talking to isn't even fully aware of themselves, right? So,
Hmm.
but it is that starting point of being curious, and that is that mindset, that attitude, and as we said earlier, that identity that you're adopting. I mean, I've worked with people who work with a guy from one of the biggest companies in Ireland, that one of the biggest supplier to the biggest supermarket chain, one of the biggest
Hmm.
supermarket chains, and it's a huge supermarket, multinational. And long story short, like, I brought in one of the people who used to be in the role that he would negotiate against in the giant supermarket chain.
Hmm.
And that was totally enlightening for him, because the other guy, now, he was retired or doing his other things, but he would say, like, he said to us in no uncertain terms, oh, like, you had to take your conscience and put it in the glove box before you went into that negotiation room. Like, the role that you needed to adopt, without a shadow of a doubt, was that of a psychopath. Literally, you need to just, all compassion. And it is that attitude, because that's how many of these larger corporate people are trained, that you need to
Hmm.
absolutely go for every weakness. You need to ask for something, like, what is it? Some say 5, others say 7 or 8 times continually. Like, no doesn't mean no. No means just keep asking, keep demanding it, keep threatening.
Hmm.
All of these sort of quite unsavory characteristics, quite unsavory actions. Now, thankfully, not all business to business negotiations are like that, particularly where there's
Yeah.
a relationship there to be established, rather
Yeah.
than one person whose whole job is to. This is often the criticism of procurement as well, right? The nightmare that
Oh yeah.
you do this fabulous deal, and then they're, oh, great, yeah, fabulous, shake hands, let's all go for drinks. And then a week later, you're passed on to procurement. You're getting this guy going, hey, right, all of these things need to be negotiated down. I mean, the secret there, by the way, is to get a third party who's even higher to literally wave procurement through, to say, do not go near it because this is done.
Yeah. No.
You know?
No. It's true. I think it's really about the value that's being, as you put it earlier, created. Where if it is something that is perpetual and ongoing, where we're negotiating just not just a contract, but price variation, say the supermarket example, and that's a very tough business, typically with very very tight margins, and where the relationships that one has are really transactional, even if they're long term. You
Mm.
could think of discounted chains here in the United States. Whereas, say, the work that others would do, where you're creating a great deal of value, or the value add is very, very significant potentially. That, again, that the very nature of the incentives or what is the outcome is, I think, much more powerful. It's
Absolutely.
Charlie
I mean,
Munger here in the U.S.
yeah,
Likes to say, "Show me," as everyone probably knows, or many will, that show me the incentives, and I'll show you an outcome, and that it's
exactly. And
typically
so you have
very,
to be
very favorable.
super careful of those incentives.
Yeah,
There's loads
yeah,
of metaphors. I'm sure you know the Bombay Cobra story.
hmm,
You know that one?
yeah,
For some of your listeners, very quickly, basically the British Empire, 1890s, whatever, in India and
yeah,
Bombay, and there was a cobra problem, in the
hmm,
city. problem, as you can imagine, dangerous animal.
Yep.
So they
Yep.
said, oh, if you bring dead cobras, for people who are good at hunting and killing cobras, we'll pay you X amount per cobra.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was the intention of to clear up the cobra problem for innocent people just walking around getting bitten by cobras. What happened? They had cobra farms that then criminals would kill the cobras and bring in bucket loads of these dead snakes. And then they went, oh, bugger, we can't do this because they incentivized the wrong thing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Whereas, then what happened? All the cobra farms, they literally closed them down and threw them all out in the street. And for a while, the problem was much worse.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, there's loads of those stories, but one of them is, you have to be careful what you're incentivizing. And
Mm-hmm.
going back to that supermarket, highly transactionary point of view, there was still a huge value there because he had hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of experience. He had done multiple courses in negotiation, but the point was the emotional stuff is rarely dealt with directly. And this is what I work on, Scott. This is what I tend to work on. Mindset and all that sort of stuff. But the basis of the mindset is the emotional state. It is the role and identity that you're adopting. They're all interconnected. So what I helped him do was actually take kind of a step back to be able to own his emotional state that bit more and direct it.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that boiled down to me saying, profiting or performing under pressure. Because these are high stakes situations, there's a lot of pressure. And this is one of the things we touched on earlier is this idea of thinking of it as a game. And our mutual friend, coach, Rob Begg would talk about this, where when you think of it as a game, suddenly you become more playful. Suddenly you're not taking some of the actions against you as intentional slights. Whether they are or not, you're able to write and go, oh, that's clever. Oh, does that normally work for you? Oh, yeah. You're able to have this much more playful and empowered perspective. You're not there suffering through it as some sort of a victim. You've moved to being the operant power, certainly in yourself. If not, and then from that position, you're in far better position to influence and direct to a certain degree the thoughts, actions, and behaviors of your counterpart, and hopefully in an ethical way. And I say hopefully because there's still gains to be made. So, for example, to finish that story with that supermarket chap, the supplier, who was my client, he went back in with his real counterpart, having talked to the predecessor, the guy who retired out of the role, and this was the thing they discovered. He thought they had loads of KPIs, loads of metrics. It was essentially one.
Just one.
So if he was able to go, well, if I hit that one for you, can you do this for me? And it was this, oddly, they had this more open discussion with the guy who had retired because it was a lot easier. But the point was he took that knowledge, that intelligence, if you like, right, into the meeting and was thus more empowered and said, hey, if you can get us this. So, for example, it opened up whole new territories because there were already a certain grade of supplier to this company that they thought would be this hugely complex, messy thing to break into these other markets. And it turned out, no, it's a copy and paste job. Like, it's literally that easy. Well, not quite, but, not far off. And this was huge jump of potential for my client's company. And this was the point, was to step back, to get control of your emotions, or at least manage them, and get curious, allowed this opportunity, even in a hyper transactional situation, a hyper zero sum game, right? And I don't deny that for a second, yet it opened up possibilities for value add for both sides.
Yeah.
All right. So it's a handy little example.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's just, and it's also practical too. I think sometimes people can relate to that because we obviously all experience it in one way or another, or see the outcome, if you will, on the supermarket shelves and things like that, even if we order most of our stuff online at this point. So interesting. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. So we are now back and with Al McBride, our negotiation coach. Let me pick up on something that we sort of not skirted around, but talked about a bit before the break, which was, when an environment is kind of unknown or when the outcome is a bit uncertain, even when we've defined what the outcome we would like, it's just that fear of can we achieve it or not. It's like sports stars and how they play on the field and just their rituals that they go through. Do you find in your work with biz leaders and CEOs that they have, unconscious rituals that they've got, or is it really just that emotional foundation that they are attached to in some way? Because I find personally when you kind of sift through things, or if your analogy, a better one might be, layers of the onion, you peel that back, you really do find, I think, ritual belief systems that people have, even if they would never define it as such, that just very much shapes what they're doing. And rituals are always interesting to me, just simply because we do find in uncertainty, we try and hold on to something that we find comforting in some way. It could be food, it could be a rabbit leg, or anything really. But I'm just curious, in your work, does that play a role? And if so, how do you discern what that is for someone?
Well, there's a few questions in there, and there's a few directions to address it. So I'll do my best.
We can focus on just on rituals then, if you want.
Well, the first thing was patterns, because these are patterns, as you said. Why do you have a pattern? Because it worked in the past at some point, so therefore became comforting because it delivered a certain outcome previously. And this goes for by the way, any type of leadership, because I work in leadership, but specifically in negotiation / communication. But they're all interrelated, all these sort of topics.
Yeah.
But when I talk about a pattern, as I said, people have a pattern of behaving in certain, they have a trigger, they go, oh, it's this situation, and then they react in a certain way.
Yeah.
Unless they're maybe that little bit more self-aware to say, stop, is this, I would normally do this. Would that be the most optimal outcome? Is that putting me the way I want to go? And so, it's basic cognitive behavioral therapy, or I lecture in cognitive behavioral coaching as well on occasion. And that's one of those basic sort of just thought stopping techniques where even just shining a light on it, go, no, that's still appropriate and that's fine. Or you go, oh, no, actually, that's really quite suboptimal. That doesn't help me get where I want to go at all. So, like, for example, and look, and as we said, and you know this as well, again, training a lot of people, when there's feet or fists going toward your head or other sensitive areas, people go back to what they know. So you fall to your training. You don't rise to your aspirations when the pressure's on, right? Yeah. Unless you're drilled in that and inoculated against that to a certain degree, right? Yeah. And then you can suddenly get more creative. Then you're more in the moment and you're in the flow. And that's kind of, again, sorry to parallel that once again, but it is a handy metaphor, because that's what we're doing with a lot of people, is what are those sort of unconscious beliefs that are maybe debilitating their performance, how they see themselves, how they see others, the world, how it works. Oh, if they say this thing, it means that, or if this happened, it means the other. Well, does it? So we're often running a lot of these very limited scripts, limited stories that we kind of hit play, and it's a little mathematical process, bing, 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 and we move through the process to the outcome. And that's our assumption of how the world works. So we keep getting it because we keep hitting the same button. And it's when you look for a different outcome, which again, and I don't want to sound too oversimplifying, but it is the doorway, is getting curious. And you ask an awful lot of great negotiators, or great CEOs. And this was from a study of the best, not just the average CEO, but the top performing ones.
Yeah.
One of the traits was endless curiosity. Was just being curious. Oh, why is that again? Oh, that's interesting. Why is it? And they're always curious about humans, about markets, about stats, about everything. Maybe not everything, but they're in tend to be highly curious people. And this then reflects to the research on what's the difference between the best negotiators, again getting multiples, compared to quite decent negotiators, the rest of them.
Yeah.
And it is these contradictions. It's being extremely clear on what you want / why you want it, and extremely versatile as to how that's managed, as to how you get there. Right? So, and again, it's holding an awful lot of these contradictions in hand, that you're highly confident, but you're also have a strange level of humility, was the other thing that was found. That you're aware that moment to moment, it can be perfectly great rapport, but then can flip into predator-prey feeling for either side.
Yeah.
Right? That you suddenly have like, oh God, am I being screwed over here? Have I just fallen into a big trap? Right? And it's all of those little panic moments that you're able to then right the ship. And so, as I said, so there's an awful lot of traits here, but to go back to the rituals, I suppose it's about putting in new rituals, better rituals, keeping the ones that work and serve you, and with that little bit of awareness. So, for example, when people are preparing for a lot of negotiations, they tend to do sensible things, which is not a bad idea. It's like, what do we want? Why do we want it? And, if people are a bit newer to negotiation, so if they're in startups that they're not really trained or that kind of thing, or as you said, they're in companies where their expertise is elsewhere, often they need to know, their BATNAs and the ZOPAs, and I don't use too much jargon, but, they need to know their best alternatives, like, so they're not holding themselves hostage. This is not rocket science. They need to know their ZOPA, the zone of proximal or possible agreement, right? So, like, what's the worst I can take? But then they need to flip that with new questions, thought experiment questions, like, well, if that's the zone of overlap and we're not making that zone, traditional thinking would say, well, then there's no possibility for a deal. But more modern thinking would go, what would make me do this for free? Just as a thought experiment. Oh, well, no, there's no way I could ever do it for free. Really? There's nothing that they could possibly give you that you do this for free. Oh, well, hold on a second. I suppose if they did this and if they gave us this thing and the blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, that's one way to access that possibility of how the other side might add value for you. And it's the classic thing of getting down into those non-cash items, the intangibles, where, what this thing costs you is not what it costs me, and vice versa. And being able to go, hey, so you have this whole delivery fleet already locked in, whereas we're paying DHL or UPS or somebody to do all of ours. So could we piggyback on your system that's already created? Oh, yeah, no problem. We can do that. That would cost nothing. Fine. Oh, nice. Okay, interesting. So it's all of these sort of little possibilities where you can start floating them, have an array, but also know, and most people will go to things like their margins first, but the amount of times I see this, particularly with software firms, with loads of firms, but particularly software, is unbelievable, where the salespeople doing the deals don't actually know the breakdown of the cost of creating the thing. And the amount of times I've come in after salespeople who have trying to get it over the line, right? They're not software engineers. They don't have that expertise, but they haven't had those essential conversations with some of the key engineers where they can say, these are some of the things they'll probably ask us for, or ask for a reduction in the cost of. What are the things we can throw in for cheap or for free, though? Right? It's a simple conversation, but they never do it, or not never. They rarely do it. Because I've seen people where they go in and they go, oh, yeah, we can do that, no problem. That just one more thing, which, by the way, is in studies of over, I think it was like $500 billion worth of deals or something. Various consultancies did a piece of research on this. It's fascinating. But the most successful tactics buyers use against sellers. And number one by country mile, I mean, they're all big, but number one by country mile is just one more thing. What is that? Emotional desperation. Oh, you want to get this over the line? Oh, just give us one more concession. Then we can just sign off. We'll go for drinks. Way. Oh, okay. And guess what? They've just slashed their margin by like 80%. And this happens.
Yeah, no,
And the director's going, "What the hell did you do?" It's like, "I got it over the line." Why? Because that's what they're incentivized to do. They didn't have the
ex,
conversation. They don't know,
yeah,
right?
and yeah, exactly. It's just, again, it's that show me the incentive, or incentives plural, and then I'll show you what that outcome is
Absolutely,
going to be without asking some of
absolutely.
the
And
other curious questions about
mm,
what the real value is and what we really truly want to, kind of accomplish. Yeah, no,
absolutely. And
it's
you see this
fascinating how much you
with
lost.
multinationals quite a lot because they're
Yep.
big enough that they can get in a closer or whatever they call them. So you're building a nice relationship, like this huge negotiation, hey, 50 million, 100 million, because I work with some of these teams, and and this, I was like, what is one of the most frustrating things? I said, we built a great relationship. There's actual trust. Like we're playing hard, but we're fair and we're enjoying the game and we're adding value.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, that's clever, and we're solving problems and we're like, this is great. This is wow, we're building something here. And then they're great, yeah. And then the next time this new guy comes in, the closer, it's like we were almost finished. It's like exactly. So there's no relationship, and that's the idea. And you're
Yeah.
going, well, and then like procurement, there. Oh well, you need to slash that. Oh, you need to slash that. And if a company's worth its salt, you don't just, oh yeah, we'll just give it to you for cheaper. No, if it's you're paying less, you're getting less. And then guess what? 6, 9 months, 12 months down the line, the powers that be are going, this isn't fit for purpose. This isn't what we wanted at all. And the client company goes, yeah, we negotiated that in the first round, and then your closer came in and slashed everything. Same with procurement. So we
Yeah.
gave you less because that's what they wanted. That was their incentives. And we tried to tell you it'll blow up in your face because it's not fit for purpose anymore, but you didn't want to know because your only incentive was to actually cut the bloody cost,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And now that
No,
guy has moved on and he's in a different job because he doesn't give a crap, right? So because that's what he was incentivized to do, and he can hold his hand up and say, "Well, that was my KPIs.
yep.
Can't
That's
blame
how
me.
I,
That was my KPIs. I was doing my duty,"
yeah, I was
and he was.
exact. Yep. I got my bonus. I call them, I don't call them closers. I call them enforcers.
Well,
Because
enforcers, closers, yeah.
it feels, but and who they're enforcing are their own rules. It's
Hmm.
it's sort of a bit like being an apparatchik in a political circle where you've got exactly a very clear set of incentives, and so you're going to go ahead and make sure those get fulfilled. Yeah, it's just it's crazy. Shifting a little bit here, you have obviously a podcast which I mentioned, and you've
Sure.
also got a book which you have, or you're just about ready to publish, or you have published.
Yeah, it's coming out
Quickly,
in December. Yeah, yeah.
December. Okay, we are recording this in about mid November, so that'll be available shortly, and we'll include some details in the information below. What drove you to write this book on negotiation? I'm curious about that with
Well,
all the other work that you do.
if you want a really honest answer, a big part of it was I was tired of repeating myself. No, that's slightly facetious, but there's an element of that where, like, if you go here, read the book. Now, some
Hmm.
people will, some people won't. But
Indeed.
even if they flick through the book, they're like, "Oh, okay, I get what you're about." And from that, you're kind of, well, if this suits you and you want to move further down this direction, let's work together. If you're like, not into it, then that's a pretty clear thing that we're maybe not a good fit to work together. So there's an element of that, but it's also, to give access to my services to people. Like I do some charity work where I do it pro bono or for some sort of
Hmm.
exchange.
Yep.
Um, but it's to get it to all those other people that it might be valuable to that
Yeah.
may never talk to me or may think, oh, I can't afford this guy. And it's to give them that same insights that, because with it, you start to be able to play. You start to be able to get creative with this. You start to be able to actually, oh, okay, that's an interesting point. It's an interesting question. I can use that. What's that like in my situation? Now, it's like going to the gym and having a few ideas. You're going to be better than if you don't have a few ideas, right? Of what you should be doing in the gym. But
Yeah.
it's not quite the same as having a personal trainer. Yeah, I mean, different levels of structure and gain
Yep.
on the output side. But that's the reason I wrote the book, to clarify an awful lot of my thoughts, the philosophy, the approach, the method. I mean, I've been
Hmm.
using this method it's been evolving for a number of years now, so it was good to
Yep.
just fully crystallize it. And yeah, I know it's a foundational piece, but it does go into quite a lot of depth in various different areas. And a few of the, quite a few, all of the actual what would you call them? Early readers, pre-readers have been found it very insightful. And this again is whether they're highly experienced in negotiation or not. I tend to work with both. I should really niche down and specialize, but I have a love for both. And as I say, because I suppose I've been both. So you have the nice but nervous,
Yep.
who they're just that. They're nice but nervous, and they find negotiation highly stressful. They feel all the weight of the expectation on them that, their staff or their spouse paying the mortgage, all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a horrible experience for them. It's sweating, and they know they've left a ton of opportunity and cash on the table.
Yep.
And they tend to get pushed around or even bullied. And it's pretty horrible. And that's why it's called Dealing with Goliath, because it started out as helping those guys, and gals sometimes, but women
Mm-hmm.
tend to be more empathetic as negotiators and tend to be able to move to those roles a little bit better. Just as a
Mm-hmm.
word on that, it's fascinating because the research from Harvard on the difference of male-female negotiators, women are poorer negotiators when they're negotiating for themselves. When they're negotiating for a cause that they believe in, for a company they love, for their kids, whatever it might be, for
Yep.
their business, when it's framed as you're negotiating for your kids due to the amount of money you're going to make so that you can give your kids a great education
Mm-hmm.
or a great time, then they're ferociously creative and assertive. When they think it's and this kind of odd stereotype behavior stuff, they fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm.
Not all. I mean, this is massive generalization, but look, it's Harvard's research, not mine. But this is the point when I have clients who are women. I always just get them into that clarity, not of purpose, that so that there's
Yeah.
more of a cause. And sometimes it's literally like if it's if it's a friend to friend, or sometimes I do kind of pay salary negotiation stuff, but very rarely. But some of them, and it's all about that. It's literally, well, what does that money get you? It's not just a fancy new watch or a car or something. It's like, what does it actually mean? And then you hit some emotional pay dirt, and then boom, you're away. Then they're fantastically brilliant negotiators. It's
Yep.
almost unlocking that a little bit, again due to expectations of others. And men
Yep.
fall into that trap as well. And it goes back then to, I said, you have the nice but nervous, but the other side of that coin is that you have the naturals. And the naturals are the ones, who love the wrestle. They love the tussle of it. It's all fun and games. Even if they're inflicting a bit of pain, it's like, scrapping away in the front yard or something as kids, this kind of business. And they love it, as I said, because it's a game. And what's remarkable was, back in a previous life, 20 odd years ago at this stage, I was an art dealer. And when I was in the gallery working for somebody else, I was an absolute natural. Like, I would sell multiples of my monthly salary, well,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as I could. And I did very well, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the game, and I enjoyed the creativity of solving these little barriers that people would have to why they couldn't buy this, but they wanted to, and multi-directional deals and all these sort of things between the artists and the galleries and all these different parties and all the rest of it.
Yep.
And that was great fun. But when I went out on my own, and all of a sudden getting that deal over the line was, I get to go on holidays next month,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to be like absolutely rooting through the couch, to find the pennies, and that's the real startup entrepreneur experience here, right?
It
So I
is
can
absolutely.
completely empathize with business owners who are going, and by the way, through a lot of my discovery work a few years ago, discovery calls with clients and prospects, both past clients and prospects, one of the things I found that was most interesting was it was the thought of having two things: doing mediocre work. That was a
Mm-hmm.
fascinating one, was one of the big fears. And the other was having to let go of good people, having to fire good people because you made a mess of a negotiation.
Yeah.
Right. But this is why I'm talking about, you have the naturals and you have the nice but nervous, but it's also somewhat situational, because I was one and then I quickly turned into the other. So this is where it came from. I read a ton of books on negotiation, sales, and all the rest of it, and did little courses and all sorts of things. But it was also then I noticed from the more recent books, it was largely psychology, because that's what it is. So I coach one party in a negotiation to coach and influence themselves and the other party
Mm-hmm.
to a better outcome. That's the same. This is what one particular client pointed out to me. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what I do. So to put it in a nutshell, I put it in a book. That is the nutshell. So if you want it in a nutshell, it's in the book.
Yep, and we will make sure that the details are included when this podcast goes live. Yeah, I just think what's always nice about a book or about written word, whether it's online or in your hand, is just it gives somebody else a different medium with which obviously to consume expertise and just knowledge. I think it's also nice because it's or really helpful, particularly for those who might be interested in reaching out to you but might be nervous because they don't feel they know enough about the subject or are intimidated by it in some way. And it doesn't have to be negotiation. It could be any number of topics, and you just don't even know what to ask because again, it's it's an emotional experience that somebody has. Maybe they're just the idea of negotiating beyond a cup of coffee is just deeply there's a lot of fear associated with that, or frustration, again, past behaviors and those rituals that again you've got behaviors behind the scenes in one's mind that is just causing a lot of friction and pain and stress. So I always think it's great that you've someone has gone ahead and articulated something like that, which is wonderful. So we'll make sure we include it in with that, along
Please
with
do,
podcast details. Yeah,
and look,
yeah,
it will be on Amazon, of course, but it's
yep,
also, if you're okay with reading a PDF, it'll be available because I just want to get it out. I just want people reading it.
yep,
It's
yep.
not for book sales or anything like that. So you can just find it at almcbride.com/book. That's almcbride.com/book. And if it's out, you'll be able to sign up for it and download it and get some other little bonuses, little video training things and stuff like that.
Yep.
And if it's not, then you'll be notified when it is ready, depending on when this goes out. Just on that, thank you for saying that, Scott. I mean, it is the benefit of a book is getting both more undermined and also becoming of greater and greater significance.
Yeah.
And it's the guy who founded the Flow Research Collective, Stephen Kotler, said this because he was a long form journalist for years, and he's kind of a journalist of science. And he was saying, a short article might be you're getting 10 hours of knowledge and you can read it in maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes, something like this, right? And then like a long form, a couple of thousand words, you're getting maybe 40 hours of knowledge, right? But a book, you're getting someone's whole thinking over years. It's literally tens of thousands of hours condensed into you reading it in 90 minutes or whatever it takes. So in that 90 minutes, there's a high potential you're getting seriously concentrated value. I don't just mean for my book, by the way. I mean just generally.
No,
read books,
that's true. Yeah.
And as I said, this is some of the things with the advent of AI and whatnot, that the more you can enunciate the concepts, take in the ideas and apply it with dexterity, with flexibility, and customize and individualize it and do it live, that's more the human end of things that the AI is less skilled at, and we need to move more in that direction. But not necessarily watering everything down is the way ahead either. Sometimes we need to go deep in these things. So yeah, the book has, I think, increasingly value as a form.
Yep. No, I'm still a book guy. I still like having it in my hand. Certainly, my iPad and other devices are great, but there is something about book form for me still a quiet place to read, reflect, usually with a yellow marker, etc. So it's just it's just productive time, and to your point, it's distilled insight, value, etc. that can be very powerful in a way that, again, you don't always get, or certain people don't get and need, in a way that, again, the format just lends itself to that, which is great. So
very much. I just to highlight, I mean, I have some core foundational principles. I have a methodology in there as well, and it's worth having a read and exploring it. But just one of the points, just to clarify for people, just to put a nail in it, really, is this one of the principles is think like a shrink. And it's, or you could say think like a coach, but it sounds better, think like a shrink. And it's this idea of being fully present but emotionally non-reactive. And
Mm.
that's very relevant little summing up of what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
That you're fully there. That someone can go, oh, blah, 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 like a shrink, oh, you're taking all my money and you're not doing anything and I'm not getting any better. And the shrink has to be able to not get offended by that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're fully present. You're not sort of looking at your phone or some nonsense, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's exactly that you're fully present, but you're able to play that game by being present, by letting these things roll off you and gently leaning in, neither being needing to be defensive nor needing to be aggressive. But if appropriate, you can choose which is the best reaction. So it's not that you're not emotional, it's that you're not reactive with your emotions.
Yeah.
And that's the key, because the less you are of that, the more power you have to guide, direct, and indeed influence the other side. And if the other side sometimes lose the plot a bit, which they can, maybe it's a tactic, maybe it's not, when you're still cool, essentially, for want of a better word,
Yep.
and the next time they come in, there might be a bit, oh, sorry about that, no, that was a little bit inappropriate, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and you're still cool. They're like, wow, this is someone I can trust, actually. They saw me on a bad day, I was a bit off, I had a fight with the spouse or whatever,
Yep.
traffic was terrible, whatever the outside reasons, and this person was still cool. It's like, wow, okay, this is a nice level person that we can actually talk properly about real things here, and I know this person isn't going to get offended or isn't going to maybe try and over manipulate me. And it
Mm-hmm.
really is,
Yeah.
it is kind of a key point that I'd just like to make at the end. The last one I just say very quickly, just as the counterbalance to any of this, just in case people are going, oh, this is all about woo woo and it's all having a love in and teaching the world to sing type nonsense,
Yep.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you why, because the win win is a big trap too. Win win is one of the single greatest weapons the Goliaths use against the Davids out there. Oh, we're best friends. Yeah, win win. Yeah, we're cool. Oh, you're not being very nice. Oh, come on, help me out here. And people have given away half their concessions with nothing in return. Trust is built step by step, right? Win win is where you end up. And yes, you go in there with the intention of ending up there, but you take care of your side, your interests, and let them take care of theirs. And protect yourself, right? So
Yep.
it's that strange mix of being vulnerable but not an idiot. All right. If
Yeah.
that makes any sense, okay. So that we be brave to stand up and say, this is what I need and this is why. What do you need and why do you need it? So that we can maybe meet each other's needs. And the key principle here is you move people from that adversarial to an allied perspective. Are you shouting across the table metaphorically, or are you moving and sitting the same side of the table, talking about this object between you that you're trying to solve, this little conundrum here, this challenge?
Yeah. No,
And if
I
you're able to move to the same side of that table, solving the problem together, allies don't agree about everything. If you know your history, US and the UK in the Second World
okay.
War, they disagreed about
Yep.
loads of stuff, but they had sufficient interest that they both understood they were in alignment sufficiently that they could be in strong alliance and strong supporters of one another.
Yeah. No,
It's a
I
key point.
think. Yep. Nope. I think an alliance metaphor is really powerful, as well as just that level of rooting and knowing who you are. That identity piece that we mentioned, or you mentioned earlier, much earlier on, is just, I think, just very foundational and enormously powerful. So cool. I appreciate you kind of summing that up rather nicely as we've gotten here to the end. How would you like people to reach out to you via either socials or whatnot? Is
Sure.
LinkedIn your favorite medium, or or your
LinkedIn,
website, or
yeah.
what would work best if they wanted to reach out to you?
I try and spend as little time in social media as possible, but LinkedIn is because of it's so business centric.
Mm-hmm.
Where I tend to hang out if I am on social. So yeah,
Yep.
LinkedIn, and it's just slash Alistair McBride, and that's ALISTAIR McBride. This is why I go by Al a lot,
Oh, yeah.
because people have all sorts of creative ways of misspelling my name. So yeah, so that's why I often go, and that's why it's almcbride.com, not alistairmcbride.com.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they can go there and they can see what I'm posting. As I said, the new episodes of the Dealing with Goliath podcast. And in the new year, I'll have a new podcast as well, which is all around really
Excellent.
going just talking to people who negotiate professionally in all sorts of different areas and arenas, and just eking out what are the commonalities with the common threads and where there are differences. And also in trying to find what are they doing successfully in one arena that could
Yeah.
be maybe transplanted into another that they're not doing yet. So that's kind of the interesting new project next year.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you very much for carving out some time today. It's been great to chat with you as always,
Been a
and
pleasure.
we'll certainly have to, I think, next year or so, get you back on the podcast and maybe focus on some of those areas because I'm curious about them, most definitely myself, given the work that I do, and yeah, we'll kind of reconnect and make sure that happens.
Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And we'll be in touch with the next episode. Cheers, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.